us. Uh, Thank you, Sue. All right, well, thanks for joining us today. My name is Lynn Giacobbe, and I'm the CEO of Kendal at Home. The Kendal at Home course series is designed to educate, engage, and inform. And we hope that you, your family, and friends will find time to join us through the fall for many of the courses that we have coming up. Most of them are virtual, but increasingly we're trying to get back to some in-person as time allows. But we want to thank the Friends Foundation for the Aging for the opportunity to be able to bring these programs to you through a generous grant. And I'm joined today by my colleagues Sue Whitekin and Lindsay Scott, who will be co-hosting with me this morning. And I just want to give everyone just a brief overview that if you're not really familiar with Zoom, that you have a chance to type in questions in the chat box, or you can even press the little icon to raise your hand and we'll be able to bring you in to ask questions. But before we get started, I want to do a brief introduction of our guest today. It's my pleasure to introduce to you balloon pilot and owner of Seattle's Ballooning's Elliots Cohen. Elliots, it's great to have you here with us today. And we're going to let you take over the presentation to talk about this exciting topic, and we'll be monitoring the chat for any questions, and then we'll join you again at the end to open it up for questions and comments that folks that might have. So I'm going to turn it over to you at this point.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me. Well, hot air ballooning is what I'm most passionate about. So this last week, I was actually at Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta. So I'll be showing also some really, really cool photos and experiences from that as well. So here's what we're going to go through today. So first of all, how I got into ballooning, because people are always curious, how do you get exposed to ballooning? A brief history of ballooning, because it's a fascinating history, because it was the first form of all aviation. We're going to talk about how we're bringing the next generation into the sport. So these would be people like your grandkids, right? Of get them into the sport, because the average balloon pilot is 71 years old, and we're trying to figure out how do we pass that on to the next generation to keep the sport alive. We'll go through some questions everyone asks us, right? Like, how do you steer those things? How high do they go? And I'm scared of heights. Can I still do it? Right? So, and then any other questions that you guys have, but this should be a pretty fascinating about 40 minutes about ballooning. I also run the American Ballooning Safety and Training Association, becoming a balloon historian basically by reading old books from the 1800s. So this is me. So this is us flying over Lake Tapps right in front of Mount Rainier. I had the New York Times out with us this summer. If you look in August, you can see we're on the front page of the US section of the New York Times. That's actually how Kendal Home found us, because we're helping young people get into ballooning, and women and minorities, and bringing diversity into ballooning, because we think that's cool. So how I got in was kind of a weird way, because the only way you get exposed to ballooning is either your family or friends are in ballooning, right? And it kind of gets passed on that way, or you randomly see a balloon and decide you're interested. For me, I was doing a sales internship, and the CEO of the company had a hot air balloon. And he said, if you're in the top 10 of 3,000 people, I'll take you ballooning. And I was like, done. So we were selling educational books door to door, worked my butt off that summer, and I ended up being number 7, and I got to go ballooning with him in his balloon. Now, where we went ballooning was in Nashville, Tennessee, at a place called Bloopers Fork. And at Leapers Fork, Tennessee, it's where the Natchez Trace is, and it's beautiful. And we went up to 10,000 feet that day. This is a photo of where we fly in front of Mount Rainier. You can see how beautiful it is. But I remember going up to 10,000 feet and watching the sunrise. And I was like, this is epic. We landed, met some wonderful folks, ended up going back to his house. And he opened in 1997 Silver Oak. So if any of you guys are wine drinkers, that was a perfect 100-point wine, 100-point cab from 97. And this was exactly 12 years age. And I was pretty excited. That was my first red wine. So a perfect 100-point cab. And he said, Elliots, if someone gives you an incredible experience, don't ruin it with cooked champagne. So from then on, I always drink good stuff too. So this is us flying over Mount Rainier, which is beautiful. So that's how I got into ballooning. And after that, I said, well, I guess I should buy a hot air balloon. Worked real hard that next summer, bought myself my first balloon. So where did this whole thing start from? So ballooning started in 1783 with the Montgolfiers. So it was in France. and they had a paper factory, and they noticed these little pieces of paper would float up into the sky with their fire, and they figured it must be from either the smoke or it was from the, from the smell, like the stench. So what they were doing was they were taking straw and sheep's wool, and they were putting that together because it's like smoky, hot, smelly, gas. And they actually thought it was a gas and called it the Montgolfier gas. So they made these little paper balloons about 10 feet in diameter, and they started testing them and shooting them up into the sky. After 4 or 5 tests, they said, all right, let's build a bigger one and let's throw some barnyard animals in. So they looked around the farm and they said, well, let's grab that one, that chicken, because it has wings, but it can't fly. They said, all right, let's grab that duck, because the duck can fly, and then we need a land animal. And they said, well, let's grab that sheep. So they took a sheep, a chicken, and a duck and put it in a big old wooden cage. There was a rope holding the balloon down. They chopped the rope and it shot up 1,000 feet into the sky. Now, anyway, it's 1,000 feet in the sky, starts coming down over a farmer's field. The farmer looks up and he goes, holy cow, that thing is breathing fire. It's flying. It must be a dragon. So they got their swords and their pitchforks and they destroyed the first balloon, right? Anyway, eventually the French king finds out about it and he says, hey, let's get these Montgolfier folks up to my summer castle. They can fly people. This is great, right? So after those first passengers go, they 6 months later build a big old balloon and they take some people up. So the folks that decide are going to go up, when they talk to the French king, he says, all right, are you ready? Montgolfier say, no. We build them. We don't fly them. Says, okay, no problem. He's like, I've got lots of folks to be very excited to be the first to fly. And he says, guards, grab me some slaves and criminals. Now, overhearing the conversation is the queen. And she goes, no. We cannot have the first to fly be slaves and criminals. These people are going to be national treasures if it works. She goes, we need a nobleman. So there was a nobleman, his name, who was standing around. His name was Pilote de Rosier, right? Which is where you get the name for pilot, right? Pilote. Now, his brother was named Copliot. Okay, just kidding. Not really Copliot, but that's funny, right? Okay, so anyway, him and his brother, they decide that they're going to hold on to these kind of rope ladders and sit in this little kind of small little basket with a fire in the center, right? So they cut the rope, go shooting up, keep throwing some more wool and some straw and some wool and some straw, go up, and finally start coming over a farmer's field. Now, the farmer, instead of thinking he was a dragon, they decided, as they were screaming, we're not a dragon, so they wouldn't be slayed by these swords and pitchforks, they decided that they must be either aliens, right, invading army, or the devil, right, because it was coming down from the sky with smoke and fire. So they got their swords and pitchforks again. Now, eventually, they talk to the French king again. They go, how are people going to know, right, that we're not a dragon, we're not an invading army, we're not the devil? And he goes, no problem, carry my best bottle of champagne beneath the basket. So that's why all balloonists everywhere in the world carry champagne with them for landowners. So no matter where you are in the world, which is kind of cool. Now, a lot of people get confused between gas ballooning versus hot air ballooning. So hot air ballooning, although that started in 1783 with the Montgolfier brothers, 10 days later, the chief scientist inflated his balloon because he thought they were using gas. He used what was called city coal gas. And city coal gas was what they would light the lanterns with, and that had some hydrogen in it. So he built his own paper balloon, and about 10 days later, he launched his balloon. He flew up to almost 10,000 feet and spent 22 minutes in the sky and covered 8 miles. So both gas ballooning and hot air ballooning start within 10 days of each other. The difference was gas ballooning was much more controllable, right? Because you could just let sand out as your fuel to go up, versus hot air, which you'd constantly put more fuel in and you didn't have as much control. So from 1783 all the way until 1960, people only use gas ballooning. Now, this gas balloon is from 5 days ago. This is at the Albuquerque International Balloon Festival in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This yellow, you can see there's a yellow balloon and a white balloon. There are actually 4 balloons that we launched that day. And this is hydrogen. You can see the yellow and red sandbags on the bottom. So what happens is as you get ready to launch, you let a little sand out. They fly up into the sky, and these guys flew at almost 17,000 feet for 2 days in order to catch the wind they needed. And if you've ever gone camping and you weren't able to do a fire, that's what it was like. It was negative 20 degrees where they're up at 17,000 feet. It was a pretty chilly flight for them, but they ended up going a couple hundred miles. So with gas balloons, you can stay up for a very long time, like 72 hours, whereas for hot air ballooning, you can really only stay up for an hour or two. So that's kind of the difference. So anyway, they did use them. And I'll show you some of the stuff up close. You can see the sandbags. This is as we're inflating. This is the hose that's going into the appendix here, right? As the envelope was still being inflated. You can see the little wooden toggles and ropes. That's we still use it with gas ballooning. More modern day ballooning now uses a lot of carabiners. This was the actual launch.
See you guys.
Amazing. So you can see how special that is because it's completely quiet while you're flying as well. Whereas with hot air ballooning, you're constantly using the burner in order to heat up the air so you can go up and down. We'll talk a little bit more how that works in a moment. So the French decide to start using it for war immediately after that. And eventually the Civil War comes around. Now, some of you guys may know about the Civil War history. It's kind of fascinating. There was a guy named Thaddeus Lowe. Now, Thaddeus Lowe is a gas balloon pilot in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he was doing gas balloon rides. So he was taking people up for 50 cents a flight on a 500-foot tether line, would go up 500 feet, and you could see what you could see. Now, anyway, one day he sees the clouds moving real quick, really, really high, and he says, well, I think if I get up high enough, I could fly far enough that I could fly from the East Coast all the way to Europe. So he decides, well, I don't have enough money. I might as well get a government contract. He says, I'm going to fly in perfect directional control from Minneapolis, Minnesota, all the way to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to land on the White House lawn. I'm going to convince President Lincoln to start the Hot Air Balloon Corps. Well, he didn't have the internet that day like we do, where you can see exactly what the winds are doing. So he ended up in the South. Now, when he's flying over the South, no one had seen a balloon before. So they're shooting at him and thinking he's an invading army and he's an alien and the devil, right? Eventually it lands, they put him in jail. 3 months later, he gets out, he makes his way up to Washington, D.C., knocks on the White House door, and anyone at that time could actually make a meeting with the president. It wasn't until President Lincoln was shot that they no longer allowed the public to make meetings with the president. It's kind of interesting. So he says, President Lincoln, I'm going to inflate the balloon on the White House lawn. I'm going to go 500 feet and send the first telegraph message from the sky. President Lincoln says, I got to see this. He inflates the balloon on the White House lawn. That was 226 years ago. I guess 226 years ago was the first balloon in the United States. But after that, this was, the early 1960s, I believe. Anyway, he ends up sending the balloon up 500 feet, sends a first message from the sky, and President Lincoln says, we're going to win the war with balloons. And he decides to build a hot air balloon corps, a gas balloon corps. So Thaddeus Lowe builds 10 balloons. The first balloon is called the Intrepid. The second one is called the Constitution. If you're thinking about it and saying, wait, hot air balloon guy, those are names of naval ships. Well, that's correct, because naval ships were named after balloons because balloons were part of the Navy. There were also Thaddeus Lowe was the first to create an aircraft carrier where he launched a gas balloon off of a ship, of a coal barge. So they actually used them during the Civil War and World War I and World War II. Now, during the Civil War, they would go up and they could see attacks. They could see what was happening. So General Lee hated balloons. He used to make logs and paint them black to pretend they had more cannons, right? Now, what's crazy is there were over 3,000 ascents during the Civil War, and no balloon pilot was ever hurt, which is kind of incredible. Now, modern day ballooning, I took this one 4 or 5 days ago at the Albuquerque Balloon Festival, where there were 600 balloons. You can see in the photo here, we use heat, right? So in the 1960s, they decided to move to back to the Montgolfier method of heat because hot air rises, right? So we use propane in those propane tanks, heat the air inside and it goes up. And when it's ready to cool, then it cools down. We also have a parachute top, which at the top it's open as lines, and that allows us to cool down the balloon as well. So that's modern day balloons, and modern day balloons, instead of made out of paper or silk, they're made of ripstop nylon and hyperlast. Okay, so how are we bringing new people into the sport, into the, I missed an R there, into the spot, into the sport? Well, this is my son, right? So he's 6 years old. I'm sure some of you guys have grandkids and you're like, you want them to do something cool and fascinating. Well, they can get into ballooning. So how do people typically get into ballooning? Well, ballooning is one of those things you have to get exposed to, right? So if you're not around balloons in Albuquerque or in Cappadocia, Turkey, or where we fly in Seattle or Boulder, Colorado, where there's lots of balloons, it's hard to get exposed to them if you don't see them. And even seeing them doesn't help you really get exposed. So the best thing you can do is anyone's grandkids or yourself, you can actually go and join a balloon crew. And it's a local pilot who's not a commercial pilot. You can come out for free. You can come and learn about balloons, how to put together and chase balloons. It's really invigorating and fun. So this, what my son is holding here is called the crown line. That's the top of the balloon. And this balloon, these two boys that are in it, they're actually 17 years old. And they're part of our hot air balloon program to get young people called the Aeronauts program. You can see the balloon there says Prime Video and the Aeronauts. It's a movie that Prime Video put out in the about a gas balloon pilot in the 1800s, a female who broke the record, and they went up to 30,000 feet in a gas balloon in the 1800s. Very cool. So this was two of our high school kids. This is part of our balloon program. You can see half of them are women. Everyone is under 22 years old. So we're doing 16 and 22, and we have over 30 student pilots right now. So if you think about, there were only 80 new pilots in the entire United States last year. It's a big deal that we have 30 to 40 student pilots. And our whole goal is getting young people, women, and bringing diversity into the sport. Now, the two boys on the left there, that's Cooper on the left and Aiden. They're 17 years old, going to their junior year. They got into ballooning this year, came out, checked out, and they decided, we're going to become pilots. And they actually saved up their money and they sold some other of their stuff. And they bought their own balloons. So that was in their own balloon 2 weeks ago on one of their training flights. In the middle here is Pilot McKenna. Pilot McKenna got into ballooning when she was 5, saw balloons, became obsessed with it. So maybe it's a great time to take your grandkids out to the balloon fiesta next year in Albuquerque. So she's one of the youngest pilots in the world. At 14, she got her student pilot's license, 16 got her private, 18 got her commercial. And now she flies for us and completely paid for college flying balloons. So she just turned 21. So now we do free balloon training, part of a scholarship program out here in Seattle. But again, if your kids, grandkids, if yourself, if you want to get involved ballooning, you can find your local balloon crew of personal pilots and get connected with them. And you can be involved in ballooning. It's pretty fun. So some of the questions people ask us, and they'll open up for questions here at the end, is how do you steer balloons, right? Because there's no stick, there's no like steering wheel, right? So balloons only use the wind. So officially, we are unsteerable, uncontrollable aircraft, which is why we have right of way. So let's talk a little bit about weather and then where wind comes from. Now, this is a chart of winds. This is from last night. I took it to see what the winds were doing. So you can see the winds here where at 0 feet, it says 326 at 3 knots. So if you think about it, 360 is directly north. It means the wind is coming out of the north, going south. So this means at 326, it's kind of going a little bit southwest. Now, as you come up to about 1,000 feet or 899 feet, you can see now it's saying 351, it's 7 knots. So the speed is picking up, right? It's about 4 or 5 miles an hour, and it's going almost directly south. By 1,600 feet, it's now doing 13 at 6 knots. So now it's going southeast a little bit. And at altitude, you can see up at like 3,000 or 4,000 feet, it's actually going the opposite direction. It's going north, 187 at 5 knots. So the way we control balloons is by going up or down and catching the different wind layers for direction. Now for this direction, this allows us both to go north and south along with a little east. So we have almost about 300 degrees of directional turn to use. Now, when that happens, you can really go any direction. And what's happening this morning right now that just finished this morning was the competition at the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta. That was for Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday. They have to fly from a mile out, and the scoring area is a 300-foot area where there's an X in the middle of a 5-foot area. And there's a pole that you can put rings on and drop baggies. There were 3 people yesterday that literally put a ring on the pole coming up. So it tells you how much control we really have. We do have a massive amount of control, and now some days you have more control than others. So a lot of people wonder, well, where does this wind even come from anyway? Well, wind actually comes from 2 things. It comes from both pressure, right? If you think about when they talk about a low pressure system, right? Or there's a hurricane or a cyclone, those are all real low pressure systems. We associate low pressure with bad and really windy weather, right? Because it's that low pressure is pushing in. High pressure, when you see the big H on the screen on like the Weather Channel, we're talking about, oh, there's a big H over the area, the big high pressure, that typically means the weather's good. So pressure always creates wind. Now, on a high pressure day, you have uneven heating of the ground. So what happens where we fly is we have Mount Rainier and we've got the Cascades. Now that's really, really cold in the morning, right? Now, as the sun comes up, the sun hits the Cascades and it starts to warm it up. Now, all that cold air, as we all remember, right? Hot air rises. Where does that cold air have to go? Well, it comes down along the valley. So the air actually in Seattle goes north up to 800 feet for the first hour after sunrise, which allows us amazing directional control, what's called a box or box winds. So we go north up to about 800 feet, then we come up higher to 3,000 or 4,000 feet and go south, because the upper level winds are consistently south during a high pressure system. So you can see the sun hits the ground, that cool air comes in and the hot air rises and that creates wind. Now, of course, you have the jet stream. This is showing you there's high pressure winds or high pressure, low pressure, is the high level winds stay consistent, right? So at 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 winds, the winds don't change a lot. If it says for the next couple hours, it's going to be 60 miles an hour going southeast, that is the wind. And the jet stream moves very, very slowly. Now with the gas balloon, with hot air balloons, you're not typically going to the jet stream, but with gas balloons, you get to, because you can go up to 15, 20,000 feet and stay up there for a long period of time and cross the entire country. So that's really the difference between hot air balloons and gas balloons. Is hot air balloons, you're really only flying for an hour or two. With a gas balloon, you can cross the entire country, which is incredible. So how high do balloons fly? Well, this is a photo of us in front of Mount Rainier over Lake Tapps, which is beautiful. You can see it doesn't look like there's a lot of landing areas because there's a lot of trees, but there actually are a pretty decent amount of landing areas, and we only need about 150 feet of open area in order to land clear of trees and power lines. So we actually land in a pretty tight area as long as you're not moving super fast. Now, our biggest challenge that we have is we're limited by airspace. So airspace that's controlled airspace is like where the commercial jets fly, right? So if you have an international airport like Seattle or out in Boston where you guys are, within 5 miles of the airport, only from the ground to 10,000 feet, only commercial planes can fly there. Then if you imagine like a wedding cake where there's tiers, right? And you were to flip it upside down, that's kind of that Class B airspace. Then you've got another shelf. Our next shelf is 1,800 feet, then 3,000 feet, and then 5,000 feet, and then you can go all the way up to 18,000 feet. So we're under that 3,000 or 5,000 foot airspace. So we typically only go up to about 5,000 feet max from the ground. Now, in other places where they're not around a controlled airspace or, an international airport, you can go up to 18,000 feet without talking to even aircraft control, which is really, really incredible. So the view is not that much different from 3,000 versus 10,000 feet. most balloon pilots in the world on commercial flights are only going about 3,000 to 7,000 feet max. But our hot air balloons, there was someone in Canada when went up to almost 40,000 feet in their gas balloon last year for a new records. They can go really high, but again, it gets pretty cold. You need oxygen, and we don't do that on commercial flights. So one of the things that I think stops people from ballooning is people say, well, I'm scared of heights. Well, I'll let you in a little secret. I am terrified of heights. And I'm the chief pilot, and I fly to almost 10,000 feet high. I really didn't like going on a Ferris wheel. It was absolutely terrifying for me. I don't like being on balconies. I don't like climbing on roofs. I don't like being on ladders because I can slip and fall because I'm scared. In a balloon basket comes up all the way to your chest almost, and you have to climb into it. You can't slip and fall. So what we find is it's actually people are scared of edges, not scared of heights. So anyone who goes in a balloon for the first couple of minutes, you may be a little nervous, but then everyone's completely fine. So if it's something that's been on your bucket list, you're like, man, it's been on my bucket list, but I'm just nervous. Like, will it be scary? It really actually isn't. And 85% of all balloon pilots are terrified of edges, but not scared of heights. It's a very, very rare for someone actually be scared of heights. And even those folks are really okay on balloons. So this is from about 4,000 feet, right in front of Mount Rainier. This is our largest balloons. So talk a little about our fleet. We have 4 core balloons in our fleet. We have a 90,000 cubic foot balloon that carries pilot plus 2 to 3. We have a 105,000 cubic foot balloon. So if you imagine 105,000 basketballs, that's the side of that envelope, that carries pilot plus 4. We have a 150,000 cubic foot balloon that carries pilot plus 6. We have a 180,000 cubic foot balloon that carries pilot plus 8. And this balloon you're looking at is a 225,000 cubic foot balloon, the largest in the Northwest, that carries pilot plus 10 to 12. So I think at this point, we'll kind of open it up to questions, because I'm sure some of you guys have some interesting questions about ballooning or some things you've been thinking about, but always happy to answer kind of interesting questions about ballooning. What kind of questions do you guys have? And you can definitely put it in the chat, or you can also, you can raise your hand and we can pull you on. Oh, I can't hear you, Lynn.
Oh, sorry. I said that is fascinating. Oh my gosh. Do you ever get scared doing that?
No, not getting scared. I think, when you're a young pilot, I think there's a couple of things that are challenges. Is you really have to become a weather expert in order to have good flights. So as a young pilot, pretty much you just follow another balloon pilot who knows what they're doing as a commercial pilot. Once you move to your own area, you really have to become a weather expert. And have I gotten caught in some stuff when I was a student pilot or young pilot? Yeah, and that's how you learn, right? You all remember learning too, right? You have to kind of push yourself a little bit and have some small challenges in order to grow and find out what works and doesn't work. How much risk can you take? When I first started, even as a commercial pilot, I was extremely, extremely conservative, right? Because then I knew what I was doing. A student pilot was a little wild, right? Then the second year, I pushed myself a little more out of my comfort zone. The third year, I pushed myself a little more, and I was like, okay, time to rein it back in a bit. And now, this is my 6th year as a commercial pilot owning a company. We've gone to way back to the other side to ultra conservative again, because now I know all of those things and I've understood the weather so much more. So the only thing that makes me nervous is if there's a thunderstorm within a couple hundred miles, like, could that impact us? Yes. Will it? Most likely not. We've learned the things so that we have the skills and ability as pilots, both in weather and in training, in order to land successfully. But if you get caught in a 20-knot wind, it's always a little nerve-wracking to, knowing you're going to land. I can safely do it with the skills, but that always gets me. It's kind of like being a duck, right? Like you're calm on top, but you're paddling like hell underneath the water, right?
Well, I was thinking, when you're flying a plane, as a pilot, often there's a co-pilot, right? When you're doing the hot air balloon, are you really the only person managing all of that?
Yeah, but here's what's fascinating. So with a plane, you have what's called the glide ratio, right? So the glide ratio allows, if let's say the engines go out, you can land a plane. You better be a really damn good expert at landing planes without engines, no matter who you are, if you can do that. Here's what's cool about a balloon. The balloon is already a parachute.
True.
There's an opening at the bottom and it's a parachute. So there's the max terminal velocity a balloon can come down at, depending on how heavy it is, it's typically about 800 to 1,000 feet a minute, which is about 12 miles an hour.
Okay.
Now, can you land at 12 miles an hour? Yes. Would you maybe get a little hurt if everything went wrong? I guess it's so rare. So I said that I run the American Ballooning Safety and Training Association. Partly number one is having good equipment. So all balloons are inspected every 100 hours and annually. We check every stitch, make sure the equipment is good. We only buy the best equipment like most commercial balloon companies do, because and we sell them after 400 or 500 hours, we get brand new balloons because safety is so important. Number two, something can happen is someone not flying in good weather. So it's kind of like, imagine, going out in your car in a snowstorm in a Toyota Corolla with bad tires. Well, even if you go in a 4-wheel drive vehicle, you might slide off the road, right? Well, guess what? We don't fly in poor weather like airplanes do.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's only in good weather, right? Because we're at the mercy of the winds, right? And then number three is making sure is we all have second-class medicals, we all have random drug testing, and you don't drink beforehand, like all those things, and making sure we make sure all of our pilots are completely clean in every way in our crew to make sure that we have a safe operation. And that's kind of what has separated us apart from, it separates, commercial pilots from private pilots, is you have to have that next level of safety. But it's the only challenges to balloons are power lines and bad weather and pilot error. And so again, if you're, being safe around, you don't drink, you don't do drugs, you're safe and all that kind of stuff, and good training is number one. Number two is you give power lines lots of room and giving good pilot decision-making. And if there is a power line, you practice the correct technique to make sure that no one will get hurt. And even at Albuquerque last week, there were a couple balloons that ended up touching power lines. They all did the right safety procedure and no one was hurt. So, that's part of some of the safety and skill. We're really thankful to the amazing pilots in our community.
And is that sort of across the board? So when you go to a balloon fest like that, and if I were going to sign up for a ride with someone, can I be assured that everybody's following those same safety measures?
So from commercial pilots are all trained in the same way. It takes a ton of additional training and everyone goes by the same rules. The most important thing is if someone's looking at doing a balloon pilot anywhere or flight anywhere, I would look at the reviews online. If someone has really low reviews, it's kind of like going to a poor Chinese restaurant, right? Probably not going to be a good experience if they have 2 stars, right? There's a reason we have all 5 stars and we have hundreds of them. If you're going to Balloon Fiesta, those are only the best large balloon pilots in the world that are flying those commercial flights. And that's for that specific reason.
So I could, if I'm attending and I think I'm going to be daring enough to get in that hot air balloon with someone, I could be assured that there are at least safety measures in place.
Yeah, so I can tell you'll be completely safe in that sense.
Who goes up? I mean, what's a typical passenger? What people go to celebrate certain things, or what do you find when people are coming into your hot air balloon for a ride, or what's the typical?
Yeah, so the typical passenger, people are coming for a variety of reasons. I'd say number one is someone's coming for an anniversary, right? Or a birthday or some type of special event in their life. Maybe they're celebrating their grandkids' graduation, or maybe it's just a bucket list. We took a lady who was 100 years old this year with her whole family. It was awesome. The rule is that you have to be able to get into the balloon, right? So to know that you're safe to go ballooning, I'd imagine if you were to get on a kitchen chair and you jumped off, that is the most amount of force that could happen on landing. If you would hurt yourself by your legs or from osteoporosis, you shouldn't go ballooning. If you could jump off a kitchen chair, with that amount of force, you'd be okay, right? Typically pretty soft landings, but that is kind of the amount of force that could happen. Okay. The second thing I would say would be, we have a lot of people that get engaged in balloons. We have a lot of people who get gifts or gift certificates for their kids or grandkids, or for, so they can go on that experience, or all together as a family. So, since we have larger balloons. So And then we have just people who are just, going for fun to get out after Corona. And they're like, it's an outdoor activity to do. Let's go for fun.
It
right?
might be safe, right?
Yeah, it's like outdoor, it's beautiful. And if it is on your bucket list, I would do it. It's an incredible experience. And the best suggestion I have is do a sunrise flight over a sunset, because sunrise flights have much slower wind, right? And slower, softer landings. Whereas in the evening, it's sometimes a little more windy. And so you get a little more of a little faster wind landing, which is still safe. But for older folks, we always suggest like, hey, or real young kids under the age of 8, go do a sunrise flight, because it's nice and laid back and nice soft landings.
I think when you think about bucket lists, that seems like a much better choice than jumping out of an airplane. It feels like that would be.
Because we can control that landing nice and soft. Whereas with skydiving, it's very invigorating. I've gone a couple times, but you could come down pretty hard on that because you only have like one chance to land. With balloons, we can come up and down and find a safer spot or use a wind block or all kinds of stuff. So.
Right. What's your most memorable trip that you've ever taken?
I think the most memorable was pretty wild. It was actually this year. The reason it was memorable was for kind of a funky reason. We were flying from Crest Airstrip and we were flying down south over the White River. And we were flying with a couple of balloons. And I came down over the White River, over these trees, and I was coming down to do a splash and dash, which means touching the water, right, with the basket. Which I do all the time. I come down over the trees, the wind starts to stop from the trees blocking the wind, and these people start yelling out. And they go, help us, we're lost, and our phones are broken. And I was like, oh my God, it's like 20 minutes till sunset. They have no shoes, their phones are broken, their raft was broken. I came down right to the water level. I called them over, got them in the balloon, and I literally rescued these people out of the river. We flew up to 1,700 feet, came over, landed next to the other balloons. My other pilots didn't even believe me that I rescued people until they saw these people in bathing suits. And it was the first time anyone has ever rescued someone with a balloon. And so I thought that was pretty dang cool. We did it live on Facebook and on TikTok. And, it was a really cool, amazing experience to be able to, help someone.
Did you just like hover over the water? I mean,
so balloons have so much control. People, don't understand. You can literally control a balloon within a couple inches. So I literally just touched the water. If you go on TikTok, I don't know if you guys are, checking out TikTok yet, but if you look up Seattle ballooning on TikTok, you can watch us literally save those people from the river. It's a very cool video. I think we put it on Facebook at Seattle Ballooning as well. If you look up our Facebook and some of the videos on there, but it was a pretty incredible experience being able to save people from the river. So I would say that was pretty epic.
Yeah, that's pretty memorable for sure.
That was in July. So.
That is pretty memorable for sure. So Dean has a question. I'm going to allow you to speak if you want to ask your question. You just have to unmute yourself.
There we go. Yeah.
Hey, Dean.
Okay. The first time that I've been ballooning twice. The first time that I went ballooning was an interesting experience.
What year was this, by the way?
A long time ago.
So when balloons were terrifying back in like the 70s?
Probably in the maybe the late 80s or something.
Okay, so that was decent for balloons. They were pretty good by then.
Okay. What happened was that this was southeast of Cleveland, and I think there were about 4 of us in the basket, including the pilot, maybe more. And we kept looking for a place to land.
Mm-hmm.
And as we continued looking for a place to land, we were literally running out of gas. And finally, we had to land in a cornfield.
Yep.
And it was just because we were just forced down, and obviously better in a cornfield than in a tree. So is that a kind of experience you've had before?
Yeah, so let me share a little bit about that. So there's, as far as with fuel, that's part of the reason that we have brand new balloons, because they're not porous, right? So in the 80s, they had much less fuel that they used to fly with and more porous balloons. I've never even come close to running low on fuel, but that's because we now carry about twice the amount of fuel that we need for flights. So we can save almost 2.5 hours. Now, landing in when you're probably moving pretty quickly as well, most likely is why I was having a hard time finding a landing spot. But typically you're not landing in any type of crops or around animals or power lines or tight areas. Now, in the event that you couldn't find somewhere, yes, that would be the place to land. You'd want to land in something like a cornfield because it would slow you down, and have you be a safe landing. But I've never landed in crops and I've never had that experience. But what I will say is how you pick a landing spot. It's pretty interesting. So although we have designated landing areas where we try to get to, right, Dean? If you think about it, let's say you're going to the store to buy some eggs, right? And you go, okay, I'm going to drive to the store. When you get there, you go to find a parking spot and you're like, okay, there's nothing real close up front. And then let's say you go, oh, there's a spot. And you go, oh no, that one's handicap and I don't have a handicap sticker. That's like, I can't land in, like a cornfield, right? And then you kind of drive around a little more and you're like, oh, there's a spot. And you go, oh shoot, that guy's too close to the line. I can't get out, right? That's like, there's too many trees that are too close. Right. And then eventually you drive a little further away and you find a spot to park your car and you go and get your eggs. Right. Now imagine you're a semi truck and you're going to get some eggs at the store. Well, there's not a lot of places you can land, you can park it. So eventually you park on the side and people go, that's weird. Right. That semi truck is there. That's kind of like our whole area where we're trying to get to a certain area and you're like, well, where can I land? And eventually, landing in a parking lot is normal. Landing in someone's front yard is normal. Landing in a cornfield, if you are low on fuel, that's like, well, hey, I have a time crunch right now, right? I have a time crunch and you're going to go and park in that handicap spot, even though you shouldn't.
Right.
You do it so you can go get some eggs, right? So that's really the way you have to think about ballooning is there's a lot, most people are pretty friendly. Now, the other thing I would say is one of the things people used to say back in the 70s and 80s and 90s to deal with landowner relations was they would say, I hope it's okay we land here. We're a little low on fuel. Now, that's not really, if you're flying a commercial company, you can't say that because you look like an idiot all the time, right? So, but back in the day, that's how I was trained originally, right? You're just like, oh, I'm running low on fuel. Hope it's okay we land here, right? So now in your event in that one, he sounds like he did the exact right thing he should have, right? Back in the day, probably, the equipment from the 80s was different from the balloons we use these days. And he was probably heavy in a smaller balloon and he had flown over an hour and was probably in wind. And it sounds like he did the exact right textbook thing you should do if you are low on fuel and you need to have a safe place to land. So I would suggest that was probably the right thing to do in that situation.
Elliot, are you planning that route? Like, so when, from the time that you get into that hot air balloon with them, so as Dean's getting in that ride,
so
is that pilot planning it ahead?
Yeah, so you have to also understand back in the 80s, you didn't have the internet, right? So
exactly.
I can see every 100-foot layer of wind. I can see real radar on my phone while I'm flying. That's insanity, right? The amount of, so I know exactly where we're going to go. I have a good idea. I'm not saying exactly, but it's like the parking lot, right? Like that parking lot is over about a quarter mile, maybe half mile area that I'm trying to get to about a 500-foot area to land. And I can control my way over going up and down and catching different orographic winds in the river to get exactly where I want to go. And I'd say 85% of the time we land at the exact same area or it's the exact place we're trying to land. But we don't make that decision always till we're, halfway through our flight, we decide here's exactly where we're going to try and land. At the beginning, you're trying to get a general area and then you start narrowing and then, and then you're making that final decision, as you're flying low, like, is this a good spot or where am I going to try and get to? But I'm looking at a map, like I've got every piece of information to make sure we know exactly where we're going. So.
The other question I was going to ask is, are there any recorded collisions between balloons and aircraft? And if not, how is that avoided?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So, so all hot air balloons, as well as private pilots, are under what's called VFR rules, which is visual flight rules. right? Now, airplanes, because they have electronics, carry what's called an ADS-B, which allows air traffic control to see them, right, where they are and how fast they're moving, right? In a balloon, we don't carry that because we're moving like 3, 4, 5 miles an hour. Now, what VFR means is you cannot go through a cloud, right? That includes 2 airplanes can't go through a cloud. The only ones that are allowed are what are called IFR, which are instrument rated flight, which is why your commercial plane, you go like a Delta flight, can go through the clouds. No one else can because they need to see where people are. So balloons have right of way. Now, here's what I can say. Our balloons are over 100 feet tall by 60 feet wide and bright and gigantic.
Right.
You can see it from so far away, it's ridiculous. And all pilots are taught to scan the sky. So we do have people fly around us. It's very, very, very rare. It has happened twice probably that I know of in the last 40 years of a small plane hitting a balloon. And that's typically people going through clouds, both doing that illegally. It's very, 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 very rare and almost impossible to really happen. Again, you'd have to have 2 pilots being not that bright and breaking rules in order for something like that to happen. But it's never happened on a commercial balloon flight. And again, any accident in the world, like 99% of the time, is a private pilot who's in their 70s at this point, who are getting a little older. It's kind of like sometimes maybe your kids are like, hey, you have to stop driving now. Same idea. We're like, hey, you need to stop ballooning now, right? It's the same type of thing as your just decision making or things that start to slow or change.
Thanks.
Yeah, I know there's a question. It sounds like it says is ballooning less popular in mountainous area or more popular? We do ballooning all over the world. It doesn't matter. They fly in Kansas or the cornfields, and we just like certain areas where it's near some mountains because then you get those box winds. So out in like Albuquerque, you get box winds. Out where we fly out in Colorado, you get from the Rockies. Everyone flies in valleys. That's kind of, so you get all kinds of different winds in the large valleys, and they're open. Not so many trees. You have lots of landing areas.
If someone in the audience is thinking, I might like to do this, what's the opportunity for them to do it? What's the best opportunity for them to get and fly,
into ballooning and check it out? Yeah, so I would say the first thing is look up in wherever you are, right? So if you're in Boston or wherever you are, look up hot air balloon rides in your local area. Call up the commercial ride company and say, hey, I'm interested in getting in touch with the local private balloon pilots because I want to do crewing and learn about balloons and see if I maybe want to get my license someday. They'll give you a couple numbers of the local balloon pilots. You can go out and go crew with them and chase the balloons. It's really, really fun. And that's the best way to get into it. Same thing for your kids or grandkids. Is having them go do balloon crew, having them get involved. It's, again, just getting exposed. Not everyone's going to become a balloon pilot, but it does make you the most fascinating person in the room. Or if it's a second, you've already finished your career and you go, I want to go do something cool and become a balloon pilot. You can buy a balloon and you can learn to fly. And those private pilots in the area can teach you. And we also have 141 schools in both Utah and in Albuquerque where you can go learn to fly balloons. But the only way you can fly balloons, you can't rent one. You literally have to buy your own balloon first. You can get a used balloon for about 15 to 20,000. And then you can get a brand new balloon for about 40 to 50,000. And then you get to learn once you have it. So you can't like rent something in order to learn to fly it. It's not like airplanes.
Right. That'd be kind of exciting. So if someone lives in the Boston area or in the Cleveland area or in Ohio, anywhere, where do you guys, are you planning to come here anytime soon? You seem like a safe person to take a hot air balloon ride.
So in Ohio, there's Midwest Balloon Rides is in Ohio. They're fantastic. That's a guy named Tony Sandlin. He's a great commercial pilot out there. As a commercial operation in Ohio. You've got all kinds of any commercial operator in Ohio. They're all fantastic out there. In Boston, it's something more like New England area. They do a lot of ballooning out there. Again, the best thing to do is just put in like hot air balloon ride and in your city, and you'll find the closest ones from the Google and the search engines will help you find it. So, but it's beautiful flying in New England. Down in Vermont, it's gorgeous. There's some beautiful, beautiful flying. In Vermont, there's a wonderful company up there who flies balloons, who flies big ones. That's beautiful. All the leaves are changing right now. I'd go check that out. And then the other really cool place to fly is up in Letchworth State Park in New York. You can fly over a waterfall. And then of course we fly in the
Oh.
most beautiful areas. So if you want to come to Seattle during the summer between May and September, just come fly with us. So
Wow, it sounds like it would be a beautiful trip for sure.
yeah, and then
Looks like-
Albuquerque International Balloon Festivals is the first 10 days of October. So that's incredible. There's 600 balloons, and there's local balloon festivals all over, the East Coast during the summer. So you can always go to a balloon festival and see 20, 30, 40, 50 balloons is really neat.
I think that's a bucket list. That has got to be one of the most beautiful sights when all those balloons are taking off.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah, it was, we were flying with almost 570 balloons launched on last Saturday, and it's incredible seeing that from the sky. Let me see if I can pull up a photo of it real quick.
All right. Well, you look for that photo. Dean has another question. Dean, why don't you go ahead and ask?
Yeah, the other place that I went on a balloon ride is in Cappadocia in Turkey. And so what that makes me wonder is, are there other particular places around the world that, due to their geographical features, are particularly sort of magnets for ballooning?
Yeah, so there's a few that are, there's just some cool places. Cappadocia is just incredible, right? Because all the spires and all that kind of stuff, and they have 100 balloons every day that fly. It's like a mini balloon fiesta every day. So Cappadocia is incredible. I flew in Italy over a place called Paestum, which is over like Greek antiquities. Really, really cool that they built in Italy, right in front of Mount Vesuvius. Flying in Thailand is really cool, over all like the rice paddies. Out in Myanmar, over the little spiral, the temples, absolutely beautiful. You can fly out in, flying in France over the lavender fields in the Loire Valley. So there's some, I'd say that though the ballooning capitals of the world is Cappadocia for Europe. And then for US is going to be Albuquerque, New Mexico, with Phoenix right behind that, for a number of balloons. And then I would say that, any country in the world, including Africa, you can fly over the Massa Mara and see lions chasing down gazelles while you're flying in a balloon, and see elephants, and that's pretty epic too. So I'd say if I was going to go anywhere in the world in 3 places, that if it was, you're like, I'm obsessed with ballooning, I want to go, I'd go to Cappadocia, Turkey, and I'd fly. I'd go to Massa Mara in Africa, and I'd fly the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta. But those are going to be your most incredible experiences in all of ballooning, besides where you fly in front of a giant volcano that's 14,000 feet while you can see the ocean. So
Wow.
Wow.
They all seem pretty fascinating. Dean, what do you think? Should we book a Kendal at home trip?
Sounds pretty cool.
So, and this is from Albuquerque Balloon Festival from last Saturday. So we had just launched. Now, this is only the first round of balloons. There's actually a second round and a third round of all of them inflate. So this is only some of the balloons as they were starting. There'll be over 500 balloons that we're about to inflate. So that open area, those are all balloons that haven't even inflated, that are just on the ground, that haven't started, because you do it in order, in rows.
How do you even transport your balloon to a festival like this?
We have trucks and trailers. I throw it in the back of my F-150 for my small balloon, and I have a lift gate. Otherwise, for our large balloons, we have 20-foot trailers for our 10 passenger balloons. And then we have giant fans. Everything has to be built themselves. Then we have to build custom for, fan frames, and building that to inflate the balloons and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of custom work they have to do, or buy from someone else who's building it custom. But all the balloons that we buy are manufactured in the United States by either Lindstrand or Cameron. And then there's another one out in the Czech Republic called Kubicek Balloons. It builds really beautiful, wonderful balloons as well. But those are kind of the core balloon. There's about 5 or 6 total balloon manufacturers in the world.
Wow. I have so many questions. Can you design your own balloon?
Yeah, so all of the balloons you see here were designed by someone. There are no balloons that you don't design yourself. So you can really, all of my balloons, we chose to, exactly all 300 panels of what it was going to look like. So that's why each balloon looks so different in here, right? You can also get fully printed balloons. So you can get a balloon that, I'll see if I can, see if I've got it here on my computer. You can have balloons that you can fully print on, right? So you can take a painting that your grandkid painted, and you could put that onto a balloon. You know, you can really do anything. It's really incredible, the opportunity. And so I do absolutely. I've designed all of mine, and then there's also special shapes. So if you see like this cow down here on the right, that's a cow balloon, right? And so today is the special shapes. So all of those, which are really, really, really fascinating too. I'll see if I can pull up one of their photo for you here, which is called a balloon glow. I'm gonna put it on my computer here. So the other thing you can do is at night, which is really cool, is we can actually inflate balloons at night, and then when you hit the burner, they glow. So I'll open this up and I'll share my screen here so you can see this one here in just a second. Let's see here, share screen. Here we go. Okay.
Oh, wow. Oh, those are beautiful.
Isn't that cool?
That is absolutely
You can see the
beautiful.
pig over there. So that's what's really fascinating about balloon glows is you can have hundreds of balloons and they all inflate at night. We don't go anywhere. They just stay on the ground and they glow every time you hit the burners. And we do it to music, and it's really quite fun.
That is gorgeous. That is
What other
so
questions you guys
beautiful.
have? Oh, yes, you could put a logo. Yeah, so we have the Prime Video balloon. So we fly that one for Amazon. That's part of our program. There's the Coca-Cola balloon. There's, you know, all kinds of different ones. Getting a custom printed balloon ends up being for the envelopes, just the balloon portion, right around probably with a nice logo and not every panel printed, but like a beautiful logo balloon. Probably you're looking at about 70 to 80,000 for the envelope, which is not that bad. And then the flights you're typically paying a pilot, you know, $500 or, you know, whatever to go and fly it each time. And then the bottom end is about another 25,000 for a bottom end system. So you get a fully printed balloon for about 80 to 90,000 realistically. So the Prime Video balloon, it was all kinds of special cuts of gold and all kinds of ridiculousness. And they built it in 12 days. So it's very expensive, but normal, you know, but those are, you know, that would be fun to be able to, you know, do a Kendal at home, and we can take it around to some balloon festivals and take some Kendal at home folks wherever you want to go, or do maybe like a week adventure. We go to the East Coast and just go to New England and go to different places and fly local pilots and kind of do a week-long adventure, and you guys can find some, you know, nice Airbnb castles to stay in or something.
Oh, Elliot, I think that sounds like a great plan.
So there was a guy back in, his name was Buddy Bombard. He did that in Europe. He did a week or 2 week long adventures. Doesn't do it anymore, but they'd have chefs and stay in wonderful places, and you'd go balloon 5 or 6 times. So we've thought about doing that in the United States. So if there's an opportunity, you guys are interested, happy to have myself, one of the other pilots come out and get a big balloon, and, you know, we can go and fly it, you know, 4 or 5 different over a week or week and a half, and fly 4 or 5 different places with multiple balloons, or go to balloon festival and go do that. That'd be lots of fun.
That would be great fun. I think it would be exciting.
So,
well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been fascinating, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us, and certainly appreciate the passion you have for what you're doing. I do want to just share my screen for just a minute. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And I want to encourage people to join us. Again, let me just move my slide ahead, if I can do that. Since you've already joined us today, on Wednesday, October 13th at 6 o'clock, we'll have a Kendal at Home seminar if you'd like to learn more about Kendal at Home. On the 15th, we'll have a Baloflex program at 2 o'clock. And then on Thursday, October 28th, we'll have a coffee hour focused on voting rights from 1965 to 2021 and beyond, with the University of Maryland professor, Patrick Wolfarth. So he's a favorite guest of ours. We hope that you'll come back and join us for those programs. And we certainly appreciate everyone being with us today. And Elia, we look forward to that Kendal at Home balloon tour that we'll start planning.
That would, you know, that would be really, really fun, you know, being able to, you know, have whether it's your own balloon or we bring balloons out, you know, being able to go to a couple different places and, you know, having some good wine in the evening, and, you know, having a, it would be pretty, it wouldn't actually be that challenging to put together between Airbnbs these days.
Yes.
Chefs on demand and getting alcohol delivered. It's really not that challenging to do something like that. But we've talked about doing that around the Southwest or in different areas around the country of doing week-long adventures of going to each different area and, you know, do at least, 4 or 5 flights over the week, depending on when the weather's good. I think that'd be a lot of fun. So
I can't say I would disagree with you on that. That sounds like a great plan. Well, we'll get started working on that right away. We'll put Sue in charge of that. You know, she's in charge of those member events. So
that'd be
we'll
quite
get
the
started.
member.
I don't know. That was my comment in the chat. I think I have to be a part of it.
Okay, Lynn.
Well, hit me up afterwards. We can always chat more about it if it's something that you're really interested in putting together. But I think that, as long as it's, I think that it would be a fascinating, fun thing for people to go on adventure. And again, Buddy Bombard back in the day, he used to charge like $20,000 for the week, right? Because it was like going on a cruise, but with, the fine wines and dining, and you'd meet like duchesses in Europe and flying in like France and all these places. I don't know if you guys are up for a Europe one, but always happy to do that too. That'd be my dream. But, I think we need to create one of these United States anyway. If there's some local ones that want to do it, that'd always be fun. Whether it's your own balloons that we do that are branded as part of that whole experience for marketing, or whether it's just, going and doing for residents and having some fun. So
yeah, that sounds like a great plan. Thank you so much. We were so grateful to have you here with us today. And thanks to everyone for joining us. And remember, you can watch it again. It'll be recorded and live on our YouTube channel. So thanks again for joining us. And Elliot, thank you.
You're so welcome. Have a great one, guys. Cheers.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.